there are various things that we will do during a campaign on any given material. We will start off looking for the variation of density, so we'll build density cubes and we will measure the density like you guys are doing, and we will find what the variation of laser power and density is, and we'll find an optimal setting, which we think is optimal for density. We may have to do this a few times, so it doesn't always come off the first time, or 3 or 4 builds with different densities. We may even keep an array, an orthogonal array, so that it'll, as an indicator, from build plate to build plate, and that in some sort of control part of the plate. We will keep on building cubes to make sure that from build to build we're not getting a lot of variation. But there are a number of sort of set pieces that Renishaw and people who are trying to standardize the industry and companies have come together, and they have looked at different types of geometries. So it doesn't necessarily have to be cubes. You've already seen in the experiments that you guys are doing, one of them's got like a little hook on the top that you can just hold it with, make it a bit easier, and the other ones are simply just cut off cubes. But they can also come in various shapes and sizes. So you can see some of these pyramids. Sometimes they're built this way simply to make it very easy to snap them off the plate. The last thing you want to do is be spending lots of time making something machine it off. Surface finish. So this is one of the parts which has been picked to do surface roughness measurements on, and this all depends about what you've got to measure it with, what your probe looks like, whether it's a simple, or you might go for something more sophisticated. So there's no set, from machine to machine, from company to company, from organisation to organisation, these things do change. Here they look at various configurations of geometry which allow you to look for very specific problems, maybe with the laser. So, for example, sometimes if you actually measure up when you've tried to make an annulus like that, you will actually find that it goes slightly elliptical, depending on the laser settings. And keeping that so you've got nice straight walls is something where you want to optimize your machine parameters. Overhanging area is always a problem. So there we go. And back geometry there, we'll be looking at the overhangs. Under here, where you have any support structures in there, also the surface roughness from different angles. This might allow you to look at the dimensional accuracy of this particular shape and surface roughness at the same time. What happens when you put holes in the parts. Obviously tensile test bars, fatigue test bars, something just that we use for hardness testing. We typically just use the cubes we built, and we use one of the faces of the cubes for hardness. Shows you an example of how sometimes the multiplicity of those components will be set out on a plate, and the idea is that once you've made the build file for that, you just, without having to think too much, you just put it back on, and you can build up parts, put them into a pot, and then measure them up when you get a chance. These are a series now of components for all those type of evaluation of properties. This is looking at the surface roughness as a function of the angle, as you take it through various angles. I think this is part of the Maze project. The Maze project is one which we're involved with. It was at one stage, it's just about finishing out in June. One of the biggest projects on additive manufacturing in the world. Got partners from all over Europe taking part in it. Most of the machine builders are represented on this. And they were trying to come up with standardized components. These are some of the standardized components that they've come up with as ideas that should be measured and put on, not just on one particular machine, but across a whole gamut of machines. So this is all part of gearing up towards that transition from rapid prototyping to manufacturing. You want to do manufacturing, you've got to have standards, and it has to be built to a certain standard. That is something which has been underway with, for example, with ASTM. They have a committee which meets up on a yearly basis, and they're looking at projects like this which have a standardization component to them. These are some examples of the type of geometries, what they're looking to measure. Very clearly set out, dimensions clearly set out, CAD files readily available for download, so there's no confusion. And they want all machines to be able to build and have the measurements that they're looking for within a certain range. And that's all gearing up towards being able to standardize things. And it's a big difficulty, it's more of a difficulty we think, because there are certainly makers of machines that do things in different ways. One can be good for one thing, and the other can be good for other things. These examples test the limit of what you can do on the machine. So, for example, those slots in that second geometry, the smallest of those will be very imprecisely made. So that transition from which one is and which one is, so those ones that are about a 0.1 mil or 100 micron are going to be very difficult to build with any out-of-bed laser machine to any real precision. The same goes for vertical upright stands, lattices, meshes, surface roughness, different ways of putting surface roughness. Now, the idea being is if you want to work to those standards, you would print off all these parts, you would measure them, and you would publish your results. And you can say that would allow people to be able to differentiate in the machine they're getting and the quality of the build. That concludes the chapter on process control and defects. Right, on to the dry bit, which is the Anova and design of experiments. And you guys, I'm going to skim through this because I know you guys have already done this quite a bit. And I'll try to get straight to the last example, which is some of the sort of density-based optimization of laser properties. So what we're going to talk about is how we would plan the experiment. And you've seen there the potential for this kind of design of experiments to be used across the whole spectrum of whether you're looking at the surface roughness. You've got a lot of parameters to control in the machine. And you've got a lot of different material properties which vary in lots of different ways, and you want to try to optimize for some and maybe not so much for others. So we're going to talk about design of experiments, the difference between a full factorial and a partial factorial experiment, and how we're going to apply that specifically to the output of manufacturing. So you know what an experiment is, I don't need to tell you that, but I think certainly some of the terminology that we use in design experiments, we're going to try to across a whole gamma of different types of experiments, whether you're mixing chemicals or you're actually working with these machine parameters. It's a systematic procedure which is carried out under controlled conditions in order to discover an unknown effect, to test a hypothesis or illustrate a known effect. So, when analysing a process, experiments are often used to evaluate which process inputs have a significant impact on the process output and what the target level of those inputs should be to achieve the desired result, the output. Okay. So we're gearing towards what we are going to be doing most here, which is that we have a range of parameters. Well, we have a number of parameters, and each of those have a range. But we don't necessarily go through incrementally every single parameter change. We want to be able to make generalizations across the range and how they correlate and how they correspond with each other. So we can do that various ways. We could just look at every parameter and put a very small incremental step and have thousands of different experiments, or we can try to be a bit clever about it and just select out a few levels for each parameter. So what we'll normally use is 7 steps. So we'll set the objective for the experiment, measure the density or whatever. We will decide what parameters we're going to vary and how many levels between them. We will select an experiment design. We will execute that experiment. From the data then, we will check that it's consistent with what we assumed in the first place, and then we need to analyze and interpret results, and possibly after we look at the data and the results, we will decide we need to go back and refine the range, or maybe we've identified a particular parameter or variable which we hadn't originally thought would affect the process. So, okay, this is good management speak, but yeah, in work as a group, sometimes it's always best to brainstorm these things and decide on what objectives you want from it. Sometimes there are unintended consequences, things you haven't taken into account. So that's why the whole brainstorming of what you're going to do is going to help you. So I talked about the feedstock and powder size distributions, and all these maybe what you might think of as secondary effects, which are not large enough but could be contributing. But you may have to, just for the purpose of your experiment, assume that they're not having a significant impact. And if you don't do that, you have too many things that you can't consider them all at once. So there are, obviously you identify what inputs you're going to look at. You may be looking at the variation of one single input, or you may be looking at multiple. You want to identify what your outputs are going to be and how you're going to compare them with each other. There are a number of parameters, some which you can control and others which may be uncontrollable. So for whatever reason, you don't have the technical capability to control some of the parameters. We don't have a really strict control on the humidity, for example, inside the chamber, so that's something which we may have to just hope that over the course of those experiments that we don't have that problem with humidity. We can do things like we can kind of measure the atmospheric humidity on the day and see if that's similar to what whether that's affecting it or not. But the best thing is just to try to do every experiment as much as possible, replicate it and measure as much as you can as you go along. Not going to run through all those. Now the parameter levels. So you've seen many of the parameters that we have on the machine. So we know we can control the laser power, we can control the laser speed, the point distance, the exposure time. More accurately, we're talking about narrowing down the point distance and exposure time we say is related to speed, and it is, but each of those individually have a different effect upon the densification. We also need to identify the levels, so we know that the range of, for example, we have a range of laser settings going from, we can do anything from 20 watts all the way up to 200 on one machine. So we need to decide what levels we're going to set, because that's going to determine how many different experiments we have. So we could have a full factorial, where we take, on the levels we have, we look at every single combination of settings, and that gives us a separate experiment. So that gives us a large number. I'll show you now. It's exponentially going to increase with the number of parameters and the number of levels you've got. Or we use the principle of the orthogonal arrays, whereby we assume that the parameters are relatively linearly connected with each other, and therefore we can look at the parameter space and we assume that the orthogonality is true. And that's not always a great assumption with our settings, because there's many non-linear effects happening in there. So how can we assume that the variance of one is going to be completely linear within? But We'll come to that later. If we have if we've picked our parameter and we have a number of levels, so the number of experiments we need is equal to the number of levels to the power of the number of parameters. So two parameters with two levels give us 4 experiments. Then two. Well, I'll remember this. 3, 2 cubed, it should be. 2 times 2 is 8, yeah. And then 2 to the 4th, 2 to 16. So you can see how the number of parameters very quickly exponentially increases the number of experiments that you need to do. So what we have is a set number of matrices which relate our, we can design an orthogonal array to reduce the number of experiments we do. So we can have, for example, 4 parameters with 2 levels, and this gives us a L4 array. We have an L8, an L9, where we have 4 parameters over 3 levels. And then you have great big L27 arrays. So what we've been using typically is the L9 and the L27. We'll use the L27 in some instances where we have no idea about what the response is going to be like. And then once we know more or less what the response is going to be like, then we'll carry on using an L9 array. Okay, so we need to make sure that we are repeating the experiment and it's repeatable. We need to have a good idea of an estimate of what the experimental error is, the level of noise that we would expect with it, and the repeatability. And it's the repeatability which is important, because even different people doing the same measurement in a way that you've told them how to do that measurement will do it different from day to day. So that's just human error comes into it. So that's part of the process of being systematic here. Makes it much easier then to be able to use the data that comes out from the Anova analysis of variances. So let me just move on to an example. So when we get our a new material, and we have this on a regular basis, so we will be looking at 6 or 7 different materials a year. At the moment, we've got, we've just gone from a long 9-month analysis on 316 steel, which is why you've got so much stuff on steel. Before that, we had a year period on TR64. Today, I think they were putting environmental machine. Is that feedback?
Yeah, I think it's from this. I don't move it though, I won't get it.
So we never know how powder is going to behave until we put it in the machine. We have tried some weird and wonderful cobalt chromes with tungsten, which are used for dental applications, and they have been quite problematic for methodology delamination and things like that. But this is an example of how we start off one of these design of experiments, which will be part of the kind of build up to being able to make proper parts. So what we're going to try to do here is optimize specifically for material density, but we could have also been looking at the same time at surface roughness and looking at sort of multiple optimization. So here we are, 316, cat atomized. We know we can fix some of the stuff by measuring beforehand what we know about the powder. And then what we're going to do is to optimize the density. And we've got to decide how we're going to measure it. So basically, this is setting the objectives of the study. So we can use optical, where we slice it up and count the porosity. Or we can use Archimedes, which is what you guys are using. There are other ways of doing this. So we've got to decide then what are we going to optimize? What are we going to look at in the machine parameters? So We can look at the laser power, we can look at the point distance, or we can look at the exposure time, or we can look at all three at the same time. Other things, of course, that we could vary is the hatch patterns, or we can have checkerboard patterns. So again, that's something else which we could do, but that might be normally left until a bit later on. So let's get to the sort of very fundamental machine parameters. So the fundamental machine parameters are laser power, point distance, hatch space, and exposure time. Now, we can't vary the the layer thickness within a single build plate. So we're stuck with, once we set the machine running, we have a fixed layer thickness on the way up. How many levels are we going to use? Typically 3, but there's no reason why we couldn't have 4 or 5. Obviously, you use a bit of common sense. This comes in from knowing what the machine, how the machine will react. Typically, we don't have much point in using our particular machine with less than 100 watts because you won't get any consolidation. So you would probably limit the range from where you go just from common sense on some of the parameters. Let's say, for example, right, here we've got 4 levels of laser power. That's our first parameter one. Sorry, 3 levels. From 100, we're going to take 150, we're going to take 200. Parameter 2, we're going to take the point distance, so 50 micrometers, 80 micrometers, 110 micrometers. Exposure time, here in microseconds, 50, 100, 150 microseconds, and a hatch spacing with 50 micrometers up to 110 micrometers. Alright, so if we were to do a full factorial, we've got 3 levels with 4 parameters, and 3 to the 4th is 81 experiments. Yeah. Now, if we have the same 4 parameters and 3 levels, and we use an L9 orthogonal array, we bring that down to 9 experiments. So it's a lot less work. Now, remember what I was saying, that it's also your repeatability is important. So you wouldn't just, having 81 experiments and just do the start, because each of those individual combinations of parameters and levels would have to be repeated for a minimum of 3 times to get a standard deviation. So you'd actually have to multiply the number of samples we made 3 times 81. Here, we'll still have to make sure we get repeatability of experiments, so we'll also have 3, and then it's 3 times 9, and 27. So that 27 experiments, we're hoping, on the assumption that everything is relatively linear, within this we're covering ourselves the entire parameter range through all the levels, instead of with 240 odd samples, just with 240 odd samples, we're going to cover it with 27. So we go back on each of those orthogonal arrays, we go back to, and we use this template to determine. All we do is we just pull out, our parameter 1 was our laser power. We're going to use setting 1 at range at level 1. Then we're going down to 9. We're going to use our third setting on the parameter 1, which is 200 watts. So we just use the template to populate our L9 array. Okay, so we build the parts. Here you can see it's an L9 array, but each component of the L9 matrix has got a repetition of 3, just to make sure we've got the repeatability of the test. Okay? And you can see there an average is given there, an average relative density for each of these from the 3 samples. You get then a range of different relative densities for different settings. What we need to do then, we've got an average of density for each parameter, so we need to work out what the effect is between them. So we'll take the average, 83.67, 83.51. So average of these 3, where we've kept the P1 fixed, That goes into the first part of the effect matrix, and so on. We can populate the rest of them. And that gives us a ranking on the relative importance of each of those parameters over the range of levels that you've set it. So in this case, it's telling us, if we assume the results are right, is that the point distance is ranked first in terms of importance and the change to the relative density. Now, that ranking there allows us then to choose what the optimal settings would be within the ranges, so we can then play in that scope. So here we have, that would be, that would give us a 50 micron point distance, give us the highest density, and then we can also pick out the other values based upon those optimal values. We might want to then refine around that and do an element with a smaller range of the parameter levels that you choose. And that's it. So I'm going to run through this, but this gives you so we can then correlate that with the power density. I mentioned already why we have the 3 cubes per sec. It's for the repeatability, and you'll typically have something where you map the relative density and then the level input with each of the different powers, and it gives you an idea of which is the most significant. Sometimes you see weird things coming out from this, which you then would confirm going back to metallography or your understanding of the melt. So one of them, for example, was hatch spacing. Now over the range, there's not a massive amount of difference here on the range of values that we picked there. But what we have found sometimes is the hatch spacing. And remember I was telling you about the hatch spacing, that you can have no overlap, or no overlap at all, or you can have it slightly overlapped or remove melting itself at each stage. And that having an overlap itself could be detrimental sometimes to the density. It actually causes each of the beads then to kind of slump. So what we were finding here is that you actually had a big variance on either side of the extremes of the hatch spacing. And that was coming up with the Anova results. Well, before the first row, we couldn't think about why it was, but it wasn't until later that it became clearer. This is another result over many different tests. You can see this is for titanium 6-4, and this was using an L25 orthogonal array. So populating it, you can see different layer thicknesses. You can see the bubbles are scaled according to the level of porosity in the part. So you've got the energy density of the laser, and then you've got the speed of the part. And you see as you get the high speeds, you also result in the high porosity. You have an area of smaller porosity around here, so your line speed is about 600, and your energy density is around about optimal, around about there. And then you've got, again, high porosity happening up in this part here, with the low line speeds and the high energy density. But all of that data that came into there was done through a set of orthogonal arrays, done repeatedly over a number of different tests. So that's it for today. I'll see you tomorrow in the labs. I'll see you again. And any questions?